tens of billions of land vertebrates are raised every year, probably about 80 billion worldwide, in very bad conditions on factory farms. You may have seen pictures or footage. You may be aware, often kept in cages so small they can barely move. They might be sitting in their own excrement, subjected to painful medical procedures without any anesthesia, selectively bred so that they have severe health problems, so on and so forth. If you count things other than land vertebrates, if you count farmed fish, farmed shrimp, farmed insects, then there are trillions and trillions of animals farmed by human beings every year. I want to argue, first of all, that you should think that rearing huge numbers of animals under conditions that are very bad for their welfare, that's a bad thing. That it's a bad thing doesn't immediately mean that you'll have the most impact working on it, right? Because there are other things in the world that are bad things. So you need to think about, what would be the impact of working to try to help animals versus the impact of working to try to help humans or working on some other issue, helping the environment, something like that. As a result, you might think that a very important question is, okay, should humans think that the interests, should Christians think that the interests of humans matter more than the interests of animals, right? And you might think, okay, well, if we should think that, then we should think that we should help humans, and that would kind of settle the issue, right? So the first thing I wanted to argue is you should think factory farming is bad. The second thing I want to argue is this question: should Christians think, humans in some sense matter more? That's actually not that important to the question of whether you should work on this topic. And one reason is that there might be some reasons to want to work on animal welfare, even if that's true, even if we should think that humans matter more. And one important reason why that might be is just that, there are so many animals being farmed, they're treated so badly, it's actually often quite cheap and easy to improve conditions for them. And there are very few people who are interested in working on the topic. So it's, you might be able to do an outsized amount of good by focusing on this because it's a neglected issue, right? In a similar way, if I suggest maybe that you should give money to Give Directly or to some global poverty charity, you might think, oh, but I need to figure out whether I have special obligations to the people around me, my children, my friends, the people in my community. And you might think, oh, well, if I do, then I should give to them. I shouldn't give to people far away. But that doesn't quite answer the question, because it might be that you can do a lot more good by giving to provide malaria nets or providing for people in extreme poverty than you can do by buying your kid a more expensive birthday present or something like that, right? I'm not saying, therefore, like everybody should focus on animal welfare. That will depend on a lot of other things. If you're thinking about your career, it depends on your talents, it depends on your interests, it depends on the opportunities that happen to be available to you, etc. But I'm saying I think that you should give serious thought to the question of working on animal welfare. Okay, so the first thing I said, I wanted to argue we should think that factory farming is bad. I think basically that is just part of ordinary common sense morality. It's not something you need complicated arguments for. The things that are done on factory farms would be animal cruelty if you did them outside of a farming context legally. I don't know how it's handled in the UK, but in the US, literally animal cruelty laws have exemptions for common farming practices. So the animal agriculture industry can make something legal by doing it enough. If you did it just a little bit, it wouldn't be a common practice and it would be illegal cruelty that you could be imprisoned for. But if everybody does it, then, oh, it's a normal practice, it's fine. And so there have been court cases where the court had to determine how often do people do this, because if it's not commonly done, this guy should go to jail. But if it is commonly done, then it's perfectly legal. It's kind of obvious that that doesn't make sense. Kind of obvious that ordinary morality says, yes, raising tens of billions of animals in conditions where they can't move, where they're subject to pain, where they're suffering, etc. That's bad. But I also think that there are biblical arguments that we shouldn't mistreat animals. So the other day somebody said, yesterday when I was having a conversation, somebody said to me, but what about dominion? Humans have dominion over the animals, right? And that's true. In Genesis, the humans are given dominion over the animals. Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, over the cattle, over all the wild animals of the earth, over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, etc., etc. The person who said, well, but humans have dominion, was thinking that that entails, okay, so we can use animals however we want, right? I think that doesn't follow. Having dominion means you have some sort of authority. There's maybe the sort of dominion that I have over my phone. I'm the owner of the phone. It is just a tool that I can use however I want. There's also, say, the dominion that King Charles has over a lot of you, not me. We fought a war so that he wouldn't have dominion. But he has dominion over a lot of you. But that doesn't mean that he can torture you because he wants to eat you, right? He has dominion, but that gives him actually responsibilities insofar as he has any job at this point in a constitutional monarchy. It's supposed to be that he's using it like for your benefit, right? It's not that he has like a job to do that's supposed to be taking care of you fine British people, right? And it's notable that in the literal next sentence, so like here's verse 28, okay, have dominion, blah, blah. In the literal next sentence, God tells the humans to be vegans. This is in there. I didn't write this. This is in the Bible. Look it up. I've given you every plant yielding seed that is upon the face of all the earth, every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, to every bird of the air, everything that creeps upon the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I've given every green plant for food. He tells the animals to be vegans too. And so I've argued in some of my academic work, I think we should go with the interpretation of dominion where it's not, okay, we can do whatever we want to them. We should go with the interpretation of dominion where it's more like the dominion that a parent has over a child or the head of a government over their subjects, right? It's one that comes with responsibilities. It's kind of stewardship. And I think actually that's the only way to make sense of some of the things that are said immediately in that context, right? Now later on, predation begins, and also the humans do get given permission to eat meat. That's right alongside the institution of the death penalty for murder. Eating lifeblood is still prohibited, and there are interesting sociological questions about what that means. It's some sort of sign of respect for the animals that you're not supposed to eat their blood. That has to do with beliefs that people had about the significance of blood, probably. But you'll notice a bit later in Genesis 9, God makes this famous covenant with Noah. He's not going to flood the earth again. He makes it with Noah and with all flesh. God makes an agreement with the animals too. So he's given humans permission to eat meat, but he hasn't therefore said animals have no significance. They're beings that he can make an agreement with. He can make a promise to, and that can be enforced, right? I'm establishing my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the domestic animals, every animal of the earth with you, as many as came out of the ark. I establish my covenant with you that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of a flood. This is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all future generations. And it goes on like that, right? It's between God and all of the animals that are there too. And it's also interesting that even though God gives the humans, at this point, the original plan is for them to be vegans. He gives them permission to eat meat, but it looks like in the end, everybody's going to be a vegetarian again too. Who knows the passage in the Bible about the lion laying down with the lamb? You know that? No, you don't. That's not in there. It's the wolf lying down with the lamb. Why people think it's interesting, it's because of a painting somebody did a couple hundred years ago. But the wolf shall live with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the kid, the calf and the lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. They will not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain. So the humans and the animals are all vegetarians in the beginning. They're all vegetarians again at the end. Somehow, there's predation both by the animals upon each other and by us upon the animals here in the middle, where everything kind of sucks, right? But that permission somehow seems to be a result of our non-ideal circumstances, just like the institution of the death penalty in Genesis 9. That wasn't part of the original. It's somehow a response to our non-ideal circumstances, right? I'll also note there are other passages that explicitly command humane treatment of animals. The righteous know the needs of their animals, but the mercy of the wicked is cruel. It's in Proverbs. There are a number of commands in the Mosaic Law and the Torah that seem motivated by concern for treatment of humane treatment of animals. Later commentators in the Talmud actually abstract this into a broader ethical principle that you shouldn't cause unnecessary suffering to animals. They thought that was implicit in these more concrete commands. Jesus, so there's this interesting story in the Gospels where he heals someone on the Sabbath, and the Pharisees, of course, criticize him and say, you boy, what are you doing? Miraculously healing somebody is work. It's a violation of the Sabbath rules. And Jesus says, well, wait a minute. If one of you has a child or an ox that's fallen into a well, will you not immediately pull it out on a Sabbath day? And they had no reply. Wouldn't you pull your ox out if it had fallen into a well and it's distressed? In another version, it's a ditch. It's not going to die if you leave the ox in a ditch, right? It's just distressed. Shouldn't you be able to help the ox? And they agree, yes. He doesn't make a big deal about this being like an exception to the Sabbath rules on the basis of animal welfare, because he takes it as it sort of, he thinks it goes without saying that they're going to agree with this, right? Though it is notable that though he and the Pharisees and whoever else is here agree with this, this wasn't a universal agreement. There were debates among Jewish commentators at this time about specifically this question: can you help an animal in distress on the Sabbath? The Qumran community, which is where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, actually thought you couldn't. This is part of their community rule. No man shall help an animal in its delivery on the Sabbath day, and if it falls into a pit or ditch, he shall not raise it on the Sabbath. So they took like the anti-animal welfare view. No, you need to prioritize not doing work on the Sabbath. Jesus and the Pharisees take the pro-animal welfare view here. He really likes metaphors that involve animals. I'm the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, who's not the shepherd, does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming, leaves the sheep and runs away, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand runs away because the hired hand does not care for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. Obviously, this is a metaphor. The point is not about animal welfare. The point is not about animal welfare. The point is about Jesus being somebody who's going to take care of you. But you have to think that shepherds are supposed to take care of their sheep for the metaphor to make any sense, right? I am the good factory farmer who keeps you in a cage where you can't move until I slide. That would not be a very comforting metaphor for God to be, right? So even though the point is not about animal welfare, there's like something implicit here, right? Similarly, are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny, yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father? Don't be afraid, you're of more value than many sparrows. Now he's saying, okay, God, if he's taking care of the sparrows, he's going to take care of you because you're of more value. But it has to be that God values the sparrows as well, right, for this to make sense. And it's notable, again, he's using like a common form of argument that you find in other places in the Talmud. But there's kind of like a more and less animal-friendly version of this argument. There are other people who will make a similar point, but the point for them is the animals have no value except because of their use to us. So then obviously he's going to take care of you, because the only reason the animals even matter is because they're useful to you. That's not what Jesus says, right? have you ever seen a wild animal or a bird practicing their craft? Yet they have sustenance, and were they not created for naught else but to serve me? Why had God created, Elijah asked Rabbi Nehorai, why had God created in this world tiny insects and worms? He replied, when human beings sin, he looks at the lower form of creation and says, if I sustain these tiny useless creatures, how much more must I sustain human beings who are useful? So the point in these is like animals have no value, and God takes care of them. Clearly he's going to take care of you. That's not what Jesus says, right? He says that God values the sparrows. So this is an apocryphal story. This one didn't make it in the Bible. It's from a Coptic Bible. It was written down hundreds of years later. We have no idea whether it has any historical origin or not. Presumably lots of things did happen that were not included in the Gospels, right? Because Jesus lived for decades and the Gospels are not that long. But what Bauckham says is, well, at least the story, maybe it isn't historical, but it must have made sense to someone to include it at some point. It must have reflected some value that existed in the Christian community, at least. This is the passage. It happened that the Lord left the city and walked with his disciples over the mountain. They came to a mountain. The road that led up it was steep. They found a man with a pack mule. The animal had fallen because the man loaded it too heavily. Now he beat it so that it was bleeding. Jesus came to him and said, "Man, why do you beat your animal? Do you not see that it's too weak for its burdens? Do you not know that it suffers pains?" But the man answered and said, "What is that to you? I may beat it as much as I please, since it is my property, and I bought it for a good sum of money. Ask those who are with you, for they know me and they know about this." And some of the disciples said, the disciples, of course, are always completely missing the point in the guy. Some of the disciples says, "Yes, Lord, it's as he says. We've seen how he bought it." But the Lord said, "Do you not see how it bleeds? Do you not hear how it groans and cries out?" And they answered and said, "No, Lord, that it groans and cries out, we do not hear." But Jesus was sad and exclaimed, "Woe to you that you do not hear how it complains to the Creator in heaven and cries out for mercy. But threefold woes to him about whom it cries out and complains in its pain." And he came up and touched the animal, and it stood up and its wounds were healed. But Jesus said to the man, "Now carry on, and from now on do not beat it anymore, so that you too may find mercy." Again, we don't know the origin of this story. It's very old, but we don't know if it has any historical reality or not. But at the very least, someone thought that this must have been consistent with Jesus' position, right? Or else they wouldn't have included it in this Coptic Bible. So I think common sense morality says, yeah, you should care about animal welfare. You should think that factory farming is bad. Also, the Bible, it doesn't talk about factory farming because there wasn't any, right? The technology didn't exist. You couldn't raise animals in conditions that were that bad without killing them in ancient Palestine. But it does suggest that you should care about animal welfare, I think, specifically that you should care about farmed animals, care about animals in your care. But then there's the question, okay, how do we prioritize trying to do that versus other things that we could do, right? This is Christians for Impact. What's the most impactful option? Any time or resources you spend on animal welfare, maybe you could have done something else that would be more important, right? Now, one view you could have is that you should like always focus on humans no matter what, right? Like any amount of human welfare you should prioritize over any amount of animal welfare. So if you could keep 1 trillion dogs from burning to death or prevent like a hangnail in me, then you should prevent. That view, I think, is not consistent with the Bible because just as a matter of logic, the Bible says you should be concerned about animal welfare. That's always, the time you spend pulling your ox out of the ditch could have been spent on something else, right? So you have to be willing to make some trade-offs. You have to be willing to devote some resources to animal welfare. So then the question becomes, okay, what sorts of trade-offs should we be willing to make? Well, again, the Bible doesn't speak directly to our situation because it's different in certain ways, right? In the sense that it's not like there are factory farms in the Bible and the disciples have to decide what to do about them or something, right? There wasn't factory farming, there weren't cost-effective organizations trying to fight it, there weren't vegan meals in the back. So the situation that we face in a lot of ways is going to be very different from the situation that poor people living in the ancient Near East thousands of years ago faced. But nonetheless, I think we can say things turn out to be kind of easy because I think any defensible way of making the trade-off will justify putting a reasonably high priority on animal welfare in our circumstances. So I think this is an example JD, this is a thought experiment JD came up with at one point. So suppose there's a bird trapped in a very tiny cage, so tiny that the bird cannot move. And the bird is going to be trapped in the cage for a month. And you can free the bird so that it's not trapped here for a month, but it will cost you 1 penny, 1 cent. Maybe you have to buy like a little length of copper wire to make some sort of tool or something to open the cage up. I think it would be reasonable to spend the 1 cent on freeing the bird. There are other things you could do with that 1 cent. You could give it to Give Direct. I think it would be a defensible decision to spend 1 cent to prevent this bird being trapped in this cage for a month. But spoiler alert, this is the actual situation basically. So our best estimates indicate that per dollar spent, cage-free corporate campaigns, so campaigns trying to get a supermarket to commit to only buying eggs that are produced by chickens that are not kept in battery cages where, they have like this much room each. Those, during the periods where they were most effective, have prevented maybe something like 7 to 10 chicken life years being spent in cages. And if you do the math, that turns out to yes, you can affect for a month whether a bird is in a battery cage for about 1 cent. And so if you think that it makes sense in the isolated thought experiment, then given that actually when it comes to animal welfare campaigns, that is the sort of cost effectiveness that we're talking about, you should think maybe that it could make sense in those sorts of cases too, right? So what might you do? Tom is going to give a talk later this afternoon that it talks about some of the stuff you might do. In terms of careers, you could try to work in policy. You could do, depending on your skills, scientific work on alternative proteins. You could earn to give. Animal welfare doesn't have nearly as many resources as a lot of other areas. You could work for an animal welfare organization, one of the ones that Animal Charity Evaluators evaluates specifically. There are organizations like animal advocacy careers, animal policy careers that do career advising on this. You could donate to one of the ACE charities or whatever. You could become a vegan, or you could at the very least try to avoid the animal products that cause the most suffering. Factory farmed chicken, probably factory farmed fish and shrimp, things like that. Pork is often quite bad. You might also consider there are some issues in the EA animal welfare space that are very neglected, focusing on wild animals, neglected species like invertebrates. If animal welfare is neglected, these areas are often even more neglected, right? You could give some consideration to that. But yeah, that's what I have to say. So yeah, that's the talk.
So are there any questions in the room? Yeah, you go here.
Do you think persons should be treated about entire knowledge?
Yeah. I think it's at least a good thing to do. The question will be from a theological perspective, I think. As I say, so in Genesis 9, the humans get permission to eat meat. Jesus presumably he ate fish, at least it seems like. So unless you're willing to be very revisionist, you have to do something with that. One option would be you think, okay, so like the original plan is vegetarianism, the end plan is vegetarianism, carnism in the middle, eating animal products, is some sort of response to our non-ideal circumstances. It might have been if you just got off the boat after the flood, all the plants are dead, what are you going to eat? Maybe our circumstances are different now for most of us living in industrial societies where we have more money, where we have more options. And so maybe even though meat eating is permissible, it's going to be better for most of us to be vegetarians or vegans. And that, I mean, there's an argument for that, you know, even if you don't care about animal welfare, because it's destructive of the environment. Workers in factory farms have all sorts of horrible mental problems that they develop because of what they're doing. I mean, so yeah, I mean, it's clearly better. Whether it's obligatory, I think can be a bit of a red herring. People get hung up on like these very specific, well, but what if I know for a fact that the animal had a nice life and they wouldn't have lived? Yeah, but like that's kind of like the overwhelming problem is factory farming. And then there's this other issue about, you know, on the margins, whether there are better ways to sort, but like, that's so much less important, I think. And also, I think the animal movement often has erred strategically by focusing so much on veganism and vegetarianism, because actually they're like making donations or doing direct work and just cutting out like the worst products. That is like, in terms of, you know, the payoff for effort, that is like a much better payoff for effort than trying to go completely vegetarian or vegan. I think it's good to go completely vegetarian or vegan, but like it's not, I don't think it should be like the first piece of advice you give somebody, because it's actually not, if you think about people with, you know, limited willpower that they can expend, but it's not like the best way of triaging your willpower. So that's what I think.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions on the slide though, actually, which are sort of related to that, so I'm just going to squeeze those two together. So the first is, how do we know what animal products in the supermarket are ethical? And then the other is, can we trust when a supermarket says something like free-range eggs?
Yeah, you often can't. It depends a little bit on where you are and what the label is, because some things are legally regulated and some things are not. Also, you know, how much legal regulations are enforced in practice differs. How much companies actually, even where they are advertising specific concrete improvements, whether that actually is what's being done by their suppliers, that's not always clear. And also, you know, even if you think about something like RSPCA Assured or Global Animal Partnership in the US or whatever, like those have to be negotiated based on what it's feasible for factory farms to do. So usually, yeah, they are an improvement. They're better than the thing that's not RSPCA Assured. But I think the people at the RSPCA would probably rather you just like ate lentils or whatever, because they know that there are going to be problems with the scheme too, both in the sense that the actual regulations are not really what they would like. They have to be negotiated, and in the sense that they're not always perfectly enforced, right? So, yeah, I mean, often unless you know that it's from like, oh, this is from like my friend's chicken in the backyard, you know, I mean, unless you somehow actually know directly, you maybe shouldn't be so sure. You know, you can try to do research on specific things and learn more. But yeah, I mean, I think usually like the humane certified products, they will be better in expectation. But you shouldn't, unless you have some specific reason to be sure, you shouldn't be like sure that they're just great. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. Another question here is, what about animal suffering in the wild? Should we try and prevent that, or is it, quote, natural?
Yeah. So I mean, one thing I'll say is that is like a different, you could answer that question either way and agree with everything I've said so far, right? You could think, oh, natural suffering is fine. That wouldn't be a justification for all this horrible suffering that we inflict. Or you could think the other thing. If you're just asking for my view as a philosopher who's written about this, whatever, you could find it out by Googling anyway. So that, I think that wild animal suffering is a real concern. I think we saw, I mean, it says God cares about the sparrows, right? I think when natural suffering afflicts us, we think, I should help you if you're suffering because of some disease. If it afflicts my cat, I think I should help my cat if it's suffering because of some disease. It doesn't really matter that it's merely natural suffering, right? And so, in principle, yeah, I agree that it would be good if we can help, if there are things we can do that can cost effectively help wild animals suffer less, then that's a good thing to do. Of course, it's difficult because ecology is very difficult. You don't want to accidentally make things worse. And so, in a lot of cases, probably the most that you could do is try to do research. So there's an organization called Wild Animal Initiative that does research on whether there are cost-effective things that could be done. The obvious things, actually, let me say, the most obvious way to help wild animals, the thing that actually is feasible to do right now in most cases, would be changing things that human beings do that harm wild animals. So things like urban pest control. You put out rat poison, and the rat poison basically like causes organ failure over the course of several, I mean, it's like awful the way that it kills the rats, right? And there are alternatives now. There are like non-lethal contraceptives you can use, whatever. I think it would be better to do that, right? That's not natural suffering. That's suffering that we are causing. And that also, the fact that we're causing it makes it easier to do something about it because we can just not use the horrible poison that kills you slowly. We can use something else, right? So there are ways like that, but that's not about the natural suffering question because that again is stuff having to do with things that we do.
I've got a question here on Slido as well from a bit more about what Jesus said about this and why didn't Jesus have a commandment to love God, love your neighbor, and love the animal creation? Is this a lack of the relevant moral facts or something else?
Oh yeah, why didn't he explicitly say love animals too in that? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he was thinking that animals count as being one of our neighbors. Maybe. I think in general there's this question about why didn't he talk more about animals if animals are so important? And like probably the answer to that is just the things I said about us being in a different situation. I think it's clear that he thinks that you should care about animals because of this other stuff that I said. And then, why didn't he mention them in such and such specific place? I don't know. There are lots of things where it would be nice if he said more about such and such topic, right? Because then it would be easier for us. But
yeah, there's a question as well about zoos and safaris. Are these ethical? Where do you think they fit into this picture?
I have no strong views about that. Probably, some zoos have bad conditions, or like they're keeping animals that it's very hard to keep in very hard to keep in good conditions or whatever, and so like that's bad. I don't think it's necessarily like inherently wrong to have animals in a zoo or an aquarium or something. It kind of depends on the context. But the reason that I don't have strong views about it is because I haven't thought about it very much, and I haven't thought about it very much because I think the real big problem is factory farming and like how we think about some of these other issues. We can sort that out later is sort of my position, yeah.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know why you believe more people don't engage with the issue of factory farming. Like, is it a knowledge deficit, a lack of compassion? Is it, maybe prioritization of other issues? And how do you believe we can change that narrative?
It's partly a knowledge deficit because to some extent people don't think about it or they don't know what it is, though. I also, having taught ethics classes where we talked about this and having even more so just seen broader, decades of animal advocates trying to tell people about this, whatever, I think it's not just a knowledge deficit. What happens is in most cases, you expose people to the arguments, you show them some horrible pictures, they think, oh yeah, that seems bad, and then nothing happens, right? They don't change anything, they don't do anything differently, they don't even prioritize this in an abstract way. And so I think there's some, like when it's possible to build a mass movement by educating the public and when it's not, is not just a question of like the ethical facts and how good your arguments are. It's also something else having to do with social conditions and material conditions, and people are eating animals, so they have cognitive dissonance if you try to tell them they matter, and other people they know are don't take this seriously, they don't have social proof, there's like all this other stuff. So like educating the public, it's good, and like occasionally people you can get them to like vote if there's going to be some law that, okay, now everybody is going to have to do it, then people are more likely to vote for it. So there are some things like that, but I kind of think that to some extent, in order to get the median person to care, some set of things has to change, and like no amount of telling people about the problem is going to help until that set of things changes. And unfortunately, I don't know what all of those things are that need to change. I don't understand what the material conditions that would make a mass movement possible are. But like, how can you achieve change? You can try to bring those about by having like a small group of people who are very dedicated. And the advantage that those people have is that they care more. It's not like there are people who have a profit motive in doing things, but it's not like anybody devotes their life to like, I'm going to make as many animals suffer as I can. It may be like serial killers or something. But like, these people care more, so you have very dedicated people, and they're often highly intelligent. They're the people who were convinced by the arguments, so like they're capable of and like those people can achieve really outsized impacts. Those people can get a huge corporation to make changes in its policy about how they're sourcing eggs and whatever. And so I think it has to be that like through small groups of people doing activism, doing policy, doing alternative proteins, whatever, somehow you create the material conditions where a mass movement is possible. Because I think merely educating people right now, it's good to do, but like there are severe limits, and there's something about, I don't know, the effects of original sin or something that limit how much you can get people to do just on the basis of like telling them this is the right thing to do, if there aren't people around them doing the same thing and stuff. So that feels a bit bleak, but it's not meant to be a counsel of despair, it's just meant to be realistic about what the way forward is.
I'm going to talk about these things in my talk. So
So, you talk about the Billy Graham effect is kind of when you used to give a preachment, got lots of time of people being saved and everything like that, and they had nowhere else to go to kind of be discipled. I see this kind of, this is really, really good to kind of like, I've written down so I don't forget, save the animals and limit, or get rid of their suffering, but the lifestyle of the West end up killing the animal anyway. See deforestation, there's no way to live, or overeating their food, so they end up having to adapt and eat animals they not normally would have, or get extinct because survival of the fittest. Do you think our concentration on suffering needs to kind of broaden to actually we want a lifestyle for these animals to actually thrive and not only suffer?
Yeah, I agree. There's actually, in animal welfare science, there's been a bit of a shift in recent years from models that are strictly about preventing suffering towards models that are about preventing suffering but also giving opportunities to flourish, right? And yeah, I agree that we want, it's not, if my only goal for my cats was for them to not suffer, what I should do is kind of bleak, right? I should just euthanize them immediately, right? I don't want them merely to not suffer. I want them to flourish, to be able to do cool cat stuff and have fun and enjoy life. And yeah, I agree. We should want the same thing for animals more broadly. And that will, that would require thinking about a lot of different stuff. And I also agree with the point that like animal advocacy is tied in with a lot of other movements. With workers' rights, with environmental, all sorts of stuff.
I think the conversation, sometimes when you focus a lot on the suffering of the animal, encourages individuals to, and I think it's important that we acknowledge the suffering of the animals, but especially someone who's culturally interested in a meal that consists of an animal, and has been brought up to kind of not necessarily care for the suffering. Like that's changed over time, not to help learn the spirit, but if I was encouraged to understand the flourishing of human society with the participation and the flourishing of animals, I think I would respect an animal much more than just, you should feel bad because they're dying. Well, everybody else is, you know what I mean? Like, I think there needs to be a healthy balance in understanding, these are God's creations, and we should care for them, but also God made them for you, and they benefit you, that they live and live flourishing as well as you are flourishing. I think there is importance to explain and kind of touch the heart of man, that wake up, these animals are in pain, but also go, don't you understand that because they live, you live too? And I don't think that since certain conversations, the suffering conversation, people are able to kind of see perspective on both sides to kind of allow there to be a balance. I don't know if you did that. So.
No, I think I agree with all that. That's well said.
Okay. I think we're at time now, so maybe we can just have one more quick question. Do you want to go ahead and then we'll finish?
I really enjoyed the talk. I'm very not vegan, but I've been very convinced by the things you've explained, and also the food that we've had here, which is amazing. I think that like most moral issues, there is no right position and there's no possibility. And there may be one or two points that you struggle with. And as someone who works in healthcare, and in this issue that benefits from animal testing, I wonder what your positions is on that. This is not the first time I would ask about that.
Yeah. So it's not something I have super strong views on. I think if you just want my personal opinion, I think, animal testing could be justified in some cases. I think probably a lot of actual animal testing is not justified. Obviously some is just done for like cosmetics or whatever, but some of it I think is either it's unnecessarily cruel, the actual specific way that it's done, or the actual knowledge value that you would expect to gain doesn't justify what you're doing. I don't have super strong views on this. The number of animals affected is much smaller than by factory farming, though it is true that some experiments are like very gnarly. My position would be, I think it's probably okay in principle in some cases that wouldn't necessarily license everything that actually happens. And you should sort of, your baseline expectation in a society where people are treating animals horribly in all these other ways should probably be that it's not surprising if a lot of the actual testing is not really justified because people in general are not thinking about animals as seriously as they should. And
Well, thank you very much for coming. Look forward to having more conversations with people too. So let's thank Dustin one more